Out of the three big video game companies, Nintendo is arguably the most unique. Sometimes it pays off and sometimes it is not that. Nintendo has one of the greatest back catalogs of games, and the Wii Virtual Console was damn near perfect. So why is it so hard for Nintendo to do the same thing again? To quickly summarize, the Virtual Console, for those unaware, was basically a very bare bones emulator for a ton of consoles, including the NES, Super Nintendo, N64, and even non-Nintendo consoles like the TurboGrafx and Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis if you don't have free healthcare. Obama! You couldn't change the aspect ratio, frame rate, none of the textures were updated, and the NES games looked like they'd been dipped in gasoline. But they played the games well, and that was all that you really needed back then, especially for N64, which can still be a pain to emulate these days. Plus, the games are like 10 or 15 bucks, so it's whatever. The Wii U Virtual Console added button remapping and save states, which was nice, but instead of being able to simply download the content you already bought on the Wii, you had to buy it all again, but fine, whatever, I guess it's only like 10 bucks, who cares, right? Well, even back on the PS3, when you bought a legacy PS1 game, you could also download it on your Vita, which was great for the 4 people that owned a Vita and was unusually consumer friendly for Sony. At the time, this made me think, why can't Nintendo do the same thing on the 3DS? But the 3DS was pretty underpowered, so maybe the games were for some reason unplayable. However, for some bizarre reason, the Wii U Virtual Console also had Game Boy Advance games. Typically, you'd think a handheld experience would work better on an actual handheld, but what do I know? This was a great opportunity to allow Nintendo to take a page from Sony's book and have a shared game library between GBA games on the 3DS and the Wii U. Yet for some reason, Nintendo decided they didn't want to put GBA games on the 3DS. Well, maybe the 3DS and the new Nintendo 3DS weren't capable of running GBA games. It seems a bit odd, but maybe something to do with the architecture made it difficult to emulate. Well, that's not true, because if you bought a 3DS at or close to launch and paid full price, you were eligible for what Nintendo called the Ambassador Program. To quickly summarize, this was Nintendo's way of apologizing for the pathetic launch lineup and subsequent lack of games for the 3DS at the time, and they offered a handful of free Virtual Console games, 10 of which were Game Boy Advance games running on the original 3DS. This was the only way you could play GBA games on the 3DS without modding, and Nintendo decided to just not do it ever again. On the topic of limited time downloads, Zelda 4 Swords Adventures is one of the very few multiplayer Zelda games, and the only one that doesn't actively make you want to end it all. The only way to play the GameCube game was to get a copy of the game, a GameCube, 4 Game Boy Advances, and 4 GBA link cables, as well as obviously a TV. This is the only way to play this game. But 2 years before this, in 2002, Nintendo released a remake of A Link to the Past for the Game Boy Advance and included 4 swords. It's not the same game as the GameCube version, but it's the same concept. The original GBA game was bundled with the GBA remake of Link to the Past. The game also couldn't be played in single player, it had to be played in multiplayer. In order to do this, you needed 2 sets of Game Boy Advance link cables. But in September of 2011 and early 2012, for the 25th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda, Nintendo re-released the game on the DSi and 3DS eShop. The game allowed you to play in single player mode with new levels, and you could connect to other consoles via wireless multiplayer, no longer needing all that other bullshit. But do you know what was even better? It was free. Yes, Nintendo refused to let you pay $10 once for Donkey Kong Country, but are willing to give you a completely reworked Zelda game for free? So Nintendo provided the best way to play this game on, at the time, modern consoles. But these sadistic demons decided to only make the game available for less than half a year, and have only re-released it once, in 2014, only in North America. So, to quickly recap, in 2002, Nintendo released one of the only multiplayer Zelda games which required you to own 4 separate consoles and link cables in order to even play the game. Fixed the issue in 2012 and made it free, then promptly removed it so fans could never play it again unless they buy a console with it already installed on eBay. Just, like, why do that? Instead of continuing the you pay once and you own that digital copy of the game, you now pay a subscription service, which is usually around 20 to 30 bucks for the entire year, which is really good. So this sounds like a win. You can play online and you get a bunch of free games. in theory. The problem comes when you want to pay maybe $5 for a copy of Super Metroid, but you don't really play the Switch online that much. But you can't. You have to buy a subscription every month if you want to play this game on your Nintendo Switch. Not to mention, this is only for NES and Super Nintendo games. If you want to play Sega Mega Drive and Nintendo 64 games, you're going to have to pay an extra fee. In some places, this doubles the price of the yearly subscription, so you're paying around $50 in order to play N64 games. And the features that the Nintendo Switch subscription service offers are pretty lacking. You can change the controls to the actual settings of the Switch, but that really shouldn't be necessary. There are also no border options, no options to change how the game looks or the frame rate, but they did add online multiplayer for some games, which is really cool. When the online multiplayer works, it is an excellent experience. But when it doesn't, it's borderline unplayable.
Bro, I'm lagging!
This could have been an excellent opportunity for Nintendo to add new features that were missing in older games. For example, if you played Mario Kart 64 with 3 players or more on the original N64, the game would have no bots. This is because the original N64 wasn't powerful enough to run the game with 3 other players and bots. Instead of adding a feature to have bots in 4-player split screen, Nintendo didn't change it at all. Okay, so maybe Nintendo want to keep the game as authentic as possible. Well, not really, because as of the writing of this video, there's no way to see ghost data because that was tied to the N64 save cart pack thingo that you put in the controller, or at least that's the reason I've seen online. Now let's talk about the Super Mario 3D All-Stars bundle that has been picked apart since its release, so I'll briefly cover it. Well, as briefly as possible. For the 35th anniversary of everyone's favourite medical professional, Miyamoto came down and blessed fans with a remake of Mario's best 3D games on the Switch, Super Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, and Mario Galaxy. Let's just tackle this one in order, shall we? The Mario 64 ROM that they used was the Shindu version of the game. I have definitely pronounced that wrong. Only released in Japan, this was an updated version of the original game that included rumble features and removed backwards long jumps. Depending on who you ask, this is a negative, but most people didn't really care. What most people did care about, however, was that the game had no widescreen support. The game looked better, but this was nothing that you can't do with an emulator. It looked sharper, but none of the textures were improved. In fact, through hacks, you can even play the game online with friends on PC. And in these versions, you can backwards long jump until you can't feel your hands anymore. But apart from this, there was nothing wrong with the game. It wasn't anything like the Ocarina of Time graphical issues. The Sunshine port was also okay. They reworked some controls so it would work with the analog triggers not present on the Switch, added widescreen support. The game looks great, apart from the cutscenes that were pre-rendered and still looks like something out of 2002. Mario Galaxy was also given widescreen support, and you can use the touchscreen as a pointer and handheld. You also don't have to shake the controller in order to swing, which was really cool. Where Nintendo really went wrong was just in the not trying department. The pack doesn't include Mario Galaxy 2, which a lot of people to basically be a part 2 to Mario Galaxy instead of its own sequel. There was no button remapping, if that's your thing, no save states, no widescreen for Mario 64, a newer version of 64 that removed the backwards long jump, which some people didn't like, and if you really wanted to go above and beyond, they could have added Mario 64 DS, but unsurprisingly didn't. But what did they add? Soundtracks. Like, thanks? You could have not done this, I guess, but like, thanks for doing it. Before this game came out, and still after it came out, I can look these songs up on YouTube. I would have much preferred if they just put these on Spotify, because in no world am I booting up Mario 3D All-Stars to hear soundtracks for this game when I can just Google them. Oh, and it cost $70, and was only available for a year.
No. Silly. Forget it.
Zelda remakes are a whole other beast. Apart from Nintendo censoring the cock and ball torture dungeon in Ocarina of Time 3D, these games are pretty top notch. They look better, feel better, so many quality of life changes, and they are, in my opinion, the best ways to play the N64 games. They also released Wind Waker HD, which was stellar. Better graphics, ran smoother, and the sailing was way faster, which was a major complaint in the GameCube original. So while on this hot streak, Nintendo released a remake of Twilight Princess. Not for the 3DS, for the Wii U. A console that could already play Twilight Princess. And on the Wii, the console just before the Wii U, you could play not only one version of Twilight Princess, but 2. But whatever, it's like $40, right? It was a good deal. What? What was that? Oh, they sold it for full price? Of a new game? Alright, word. Yeah, so this remake of a game that came out a decade ago, that you can also already play on the console, cost the price of a new game. Keep in mind that at the time, the last 3D mainline Zelda game that released on a home console was in 2011, and the Wii U was yet to see an original Zelda game made for it. Then Nintendo, still being on demon timing, decided to repeat and do the same thing with Skyward Sword on the Switch. Now look, if it was like the 3DS games or Wind Waker, where the games had both come out a decently long time ago and there were significant upgrades made to them, then the price tag would be more understandable. But for Skyward Sword to be given an HD upgrade and that's it, $70 is absurd. Even if they removed that stupid sprint meter or just made it deplete slower, I would have been more accepting. But the only substantial difference was that they made a new fast travel system, which was good. That stupid statue thing was annoying in the original Wii game. But do you want to hear something funny? In order to use that new system, you had to buy a goddamn amiibo! Yes, arguably the best change to the game is locked behind a little plastic toy. Now look, all of this isn't to say that Nintendo are bad at remaking their games. Look at the NES and Super Nintendo Classic. Those things slap. You can change the aspect ratio, how the game looks, the borders, and the price for the amount of games you got was really good. And for the Super Nintendo, you got an entirely unreleased Star Fox game. But when it comes to their mainline consoles, Nintendo seems to have largely forgotten how to remake their old titles, or even just to port them. The Nintendo Switch Online service has some issues, but there is some gold underneath that. If Nintendo just ironed out the kinks, added some better support for the N64 games, then I think they could really have something special in their hands. And if I could end this video by just saying one thing, Nintendo. Please bring GameCube games to the Nintendo Switch Online. Thank you, bye.